Sarah had always been the kind of woman who carried her emotions quietly. After her divorce 2 years ago, she learned to mask the ache behind a soft smile and polite conversations. Her life in Portland had settled into a predictable rhythm: work, home, coffee with friends on Sundays, and long, lonely evenings spent listening to rain against the window. She was 45, still beautiful in a calm, graceful way. But she'd long stopped believing life had surprises left for her. One afternoon, her close friend Amanda called to ask if she could help out for a few days. Amanda and her husband were flying out of town, and she needed someone to check in on her nephew, Ryan, who had just moved to Portland to start his massage therapy business. Ryan had been setting up a small studio and had injured his shoulder while lifting heavy equipment. He needed someone to help with groceries and errands. Sarah agreed immediately. She'd known Amanda for 15 years, and helping her felt natural. She didn't think much of Ryan, just remembered him vaguely as a quiet young man from family gatherings years ago. But when she met him again, she was taken aback. He wasn't the awkward college kid she remembered. He was 30 now, confident, with kind green eyes and an easy smile that carried warmth. Ryan lived in a cozy apartment near downtown. When Sarah arrived that first day with soup and groceries, he greeted her with genuine surprise. "Aunt Sarah, you didn't have to come all this way," he said, though technically she wasn't his aunt, just his aunt's best friend. She laughed, brushing off the title. "Well, Amanda made it sound like you were helpless. I see you're surviving." He chuckled, and for a moment, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years: lightness. They talked as she unpacked the groceries. Ryan was easy to be around, the kind of person who made silence comfortable. He spoke about his dream of opening a wellness studio focused on helping people heal through touch and therapy, not just massage. His passion was infectious, and Sarah found herself listening closely. Fascinated. Over the next week, she visited often. Sometimes she helped tidy the apartment, sometimes they simply talked over tea. Ryan had that rare ability to listen without judgment. He asked about her life, her work, her past marriage, her dreams. Most people never asked her those things. She realized how much she'd missed being seen, being truly heard. One rainy evening, Ryan winced while reaching for a cup on the top shelf. Instinctively, Sarah rushed over. "You shouldn't lift your arm like that," she said. He smiled sheepishly. "Yeah, the shoulder's worse today. I probably shouldn't be working at all." Without thinking, she said, "Sit down. I'll try to help." She'd picked up a few simple massage techniques from her yoga class, and though hesitant, she asked, "Can I?" He nodded, looking both amused and grateful. She stood behind him, her hands gently pressing into the muscles near his neck and shoulder. He guided her quietly, showing her where to press, how much pressure to use. His voice was calm, almost soothing. "Right there. That helps." Something shifted in the room, an invisible current neither of them expected. The sound of rain softened everything, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt aware of her own heartbeat. She wasn't doing anything wrong, yet the air felt charged. She focused on breathing, on being careful, but her thoughts betrayed her. She wondered how she must look to him, this woman who had spent years hiding behind her calmness. Ryan turned slightly, looking up at her. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world stilled. Neither spoke, but in that silence, something unspoken passed between them: a shared loneliness, a quiet recognition. Sarah quickly stepped back, clearing her throat. "You should ice it again," she said softly, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah," he murmured, his tone unreadable. When she left that night, she sat in her car for a long while, staring at the rain streaking down the windshield. What had just happened? It was nothing, she told herself. Just a moment. Yet it lingered in her chest like a whisper she couldn't quiet. The next day, she tried to distract herself with work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Ryan, the way he smiled, the calmness of his voice, the warmth of that brief connection. She felt foolish. He was younger, kind, and probably thought of her as nothing more than his aunt's friend. Still, something inside her stirred awake, something she thought had faded long ago. Later that week, he called her. "Hey, Sarah, are you busy?" I could use some help setting up new therapy chairs, nothing heavy. Just organizing. His tone was casual, but her heart skipped anyway. She agreed when she arrived. The apartment looked different, tidier, brighter. Ryan had made coffee, and the scent filled the air. They worked side by side, moving equipment, sharing stories about past mistakes and new beginnings. Ryan talked about losing someone he loved a few years ago, how it had changed him. Sarah listened quietly, realizing how deeply he felt things. How much empathy he carried. As evening approached, she noticed him rubbing his shoulder again. "It's still hurting, isn't it?" she asked. He nodded. "Worse after all this lifting." She hesitated before saying, "Do you want me to try again?" "The massage? He smiled gently. "If you're sure you don't mind." She didn't. Or maybe she did, but curiosity and compassion overruled hesitation. This time, it wasn't awkward. Her hands moved with more confidence, guided by instinct and care. He closed his eyes, his breathing slow, steady. She could feel the tension easing beneath her fingertips. But something else hung between them, an emotional closeness that neither intended but both felt deeply at one point. He said softly, "You have really warm hands." Sarah froze for a second, unsure how to respond. She simply smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Maybe it's the coffee," she joked quietly. It's trying to lighten the mood, but inside, she knew that wasn't it. When the session ended, Ryan thanked her, saying he hadn't felt that relaxed in weeks. She nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm glad it helped." As she left, he followed her to the door, standing close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence. He said her name softly, like a question. She looked up, meeting his gaze again. For a second, it felt like the world was holding its breath. Then she smiled politely and said, "Good night, Ryan," before walking away. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that moment again, the look in his eyes, the silence that spoke louder than words. It scared her because it felt too real, too sudden, and yet too impossible. She knew what people would think. If they knew how, they'd twist it into something wrong. But it wasn't wrong. It was two lonely souls finding understanding in a quiet space. Still, she decided to keep her distance just until she could clear her head. The next morning, she received a message from Ryan. "Thank you for everything. Sarah, I don't think I've told you this, but you've really helped me more than you know." She stared at the message for a long time, feeling both warmth and confusion. She wanted to reply, but she didn't know what to say. Instead, she simply wrote, "You're welcome, Ryan. Take care of yourself." But as she pressed send, she knew this wasn't the end. Something had started that neither of them intended, something that would soon test both their hearts. The rain continued to fall that week, steady and constant, just like the thought of him in her mind. Sarah tried to stay away for a while, telling herself it was for the best. What had happened between her and Ryan wasn't anything wrong, but it was enough to stir feelings she hadn't expected. She needed space to sort them out. For the next few days, she kept herself busy, catching up on work, walking by the river, spending evenings reading or watching quiet movies just to keep her mind from drifting back to him. But no matter how she tried, she couldn't stop thinking about that last night, the way he'd said her name softly, the calmness in his eyes, and the warmth that filled the room when they were together. A week passed before she heard from him again. One morning, her phone buzzed with a message. "Hey, Sarah, hope you're doing okay. The shoulder's better now. Thanks again for all your help." She smiled when she read it. It was simple and polite, but it carried that same kindness he always had. She typed back, "I'm glad to hear that. You should still take it easy for a bit." That short exchange stayed with her all day. It reminded her how easy it was to talk to him, how he made her feel heard without judgment. She missed that. By evening, she decided to drop by his apartment again to check on him. Nothing more. She brought a box of homemade muffins as an excuse. When he opened the door, his face lit up in genuine surprise. "Sarah, wow, I didn't expect to see you." "I was in the neighborhood," she said lightly, handing him the box. "I figured you could use something sweet." He invited her in, and she noticed how his place looked more settled now. The studio space was nearly ready. Shelves lined with oils and towels stood against one wall, and soft instrumental music played in the background. "You've been working hard," she said, admiring his effort. "Trying to," he replied. "Though I kind of miss having company. It's too quiet most days." She smiled, taking a seat. "I know the feeling." They spent the afternoon talking, the way they always did, naturally, easily, as though they'd known each other for years. Ryan told her about his business plans, how he wanted to help people heal, not just physically, but emotionally. "Most people carry stress that has nothing to do with their muscles," he said thoughtfully. "Sometimes they just need someone to listen." Sarah looked at him, realizing how rare it was to meet someone who understood that kind of pain. "You're right," she said softly. "People need connection, not just care." Their eyes met for a moment, long enough to make her heart skip. She looked away quickly, pretending to adjust her bag. The moment passed, but the warmth stayed. As evening came, Ryan offered to walk her to her car. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint smell of rain. "I'm really glad you stopped by," he said. "Me too," she admitted, smiling. "It's nice to talk to someone who gets it." He hesitated before saying, "I don't know what it is, but you make things feel calmer, easier." That comment stayed with her long after she drove home. It wasn't romantic, not really, but it touched something deep in her heart. She realized she'd started looking forward to their conversations, their quiet understanding. It wasn't about attraction. It was about connections, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The next few weeks passed like that, short visits. Coffee shared, long talks that drifted between laughter and personal confessions. Ryan spoke about his struggles growing up, how he'd lost confidence after a bad breakup. Sarah shared bits of her past tooth of loneliness after her divorce, the quiet emptiness she tried to fill with work. They never said anything they shouldn't. But both knew there was an invisible thread pulling them closer. One afternoon, Sarah visited him at his studio, which had just opened. The place was calm and inviting, with warm lighting and soft music. She was proud of him. "You really did it," she said. He smiled. "Couldn't have without your help." She shook her head. "You did all of this, Ryan. I just brought muffins." He laughed, and for a moment they stood in comfortable silence. Then he said, "Actually, I've been meaning to ask. Would you be my first official client? Just to test everything, make sure it all feels right." She hesitated. The thought made her pulse quicken. "I don't know, Ryan. I don't think it's just professional," he assured her. "You'll help me make sure the setup is comfortable, that's all." She finally agreed, knowing he meant it sincerely. Still, as she laid down on the massage table later that afternoon, she couldn't ignore how strange it felt. She trusted him completely, but her thoughts kept racing. He spoke in a calm, even tone, explaining each step. "Tell me if the pressure's too much," he said softly. It wasn't, in fact. The warmth of his hands and the quiet room made her feel more relaxed than she had in years. Her mind wandered to the past, to the present, to this simple realization that she wasn't as invisible as she had started to believe. At one point, Ryan said gently, "You hold a lot of tension in your shoulders. You always take care of everyone else, don't you?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe old habits die hard." "Well," he said, his tone soft but firm, "someone should take care of you for a change." The words hit her harder than she expected. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. There was nothing inappropriate in his expression, just kindness, warmth, and understanding. Yet it stirred something deep in her heart. When the session ended, she sat up, feeling lighter but also conflicted. "That was nice," she said, her voice quiet. He smiled. "You needed it. You should relax more often." On her way out, Ryan stopped her. "Sarah," he said gently, "I hope this isn't crossing any line, but I really enjoy being around you." She froze for a second. He continued carefully, "I don't mean anything complicated. It's just, you make me feel understood. That doesn't happen often." Her heart softened. She nodded slowly. "You make me feel the same way. That evening, she couldn't stop thinking about what he said. She knew it wasn't love not yet, but it was something meaningful. A connection that grew from honesty, from two lonely hearts finding comfort in each other's company. She didn't know where it would go, or if it even should go anywhere. But she also knew that denying how she felt wouldn't make it disappear. Over the next few days, Sarah and Ryan grew even closer. They started meeting outside the studio coffee shops, long walks by the river, quiet dinners where conversation flowed easily. It was never romantic in public, but privately, their bond deepened. He'd look at her with quiet admiration, and she'd catch herself smiling more than she had in years. But with that closeness came confusion. Sarah began to worry about how others might see it. He was younger, though not by much. He was family through friendship, though not by blood. It was a friendship that balanced on the edge of something more, something neither of them dared to name. One evening, while sitting by the riverside after dinner, Ryan spoke quietly. "Sarah, have you ever felt like life gave you a second chance? Like maybe you were meant to meet someone who reminds you that you're still alive?" She looked at him, her breath catching. "I don't know," she said softly. "Maybe I'm just afraid to believe that." He smiled faintly. "Don't be. Sometimes the people who enter our lives unexpectedly are exactly who we need." The night grew colder, and they sat there in silence, listening to the gentle sound of the water. Sarah wanted to say something, anything, but the moment felt too fragile to disturb. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you, Ryan, for making me feel seen again." He didn't reply right away. He simply reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, then pulled his hand back before the gesture could mean more than it should. That night, Sarah realized something profound. What she felt wasn't about romance, it was about rediscovering connection, trust, and emotion after years of numbness. Ryan had reminded her that love, in any form, could heal. But as comforting as it was, she knew their story was walking a fine line. She decided that, soon, she'd have to choose either step back before feelings grew too deep or face whatever came next. No matter how uncertain it was. For now, though, she let herself have this moment, this quiet friendship built on understanding and unspoken care. Sarah spent the next few days trying to bring her thoughts into order. Every time she looked at her phone, she expected a message from Ryan. She wanted to see him again. But she also knew things had reached a quiet turning point. What they shared wasn't wrong, but it couldn't go on forever without direction. It wasn't a secret affair or anything improper, it was something harder to define. A deep, emotional bond between two people who found comfort in each other's company. One morning, she woke up to a message from him. "Can we talk? I think I need to see you." Her heart raced. She typed back, "Of course. I'll come by this afternoon." When Sarah arrived at his studio, Ryan was sitting by the window, staring outside. The light fell softly across his face, and he looked more serious than she'd ever seen him. "You look worried," she said gently. He turned toward her and smiled faintly. "Maybe I am. I've been thinking about everything these past weeks. You've become important to me, Sarah, more than I expected." Her breath caught. She didn't say anything, afraid of what might come next. He continued, "You've helped me believe in myself again. You've given me peace, and I don't want to lose that. But I also don't want to cross a line that could hurt either of us." Sarah looked at him quietly. "I know," she said finally. "I've been thinking the same thing." There was a long silence. Neither wanted to admit how strong the connection had become. It wasn't passion that scared them, it was emotion. Real, sincere emotion that had no easy place in their lives. Ryan exhaled slowly. "Sometimes I think we met because we were both a little lost," he said softly. "You reminded me that kindness still exists. That's something I'll always carry." Sarah smiled, her eyes glistening. "You've reminded me of that too," she said. "I thought I was done feeling anything this real." For a moment, the air felt heavy, filled with everything they weren't saying. Then Ryan stood, stepping closer. "I don't want this to end badly," he said. "Maybe it's best if we take a step back before it becomes too complicated." She nodded slowly, though her heart ached. "Maybe you're right," she whispered. But please know, Ryan, you've made a difference in my life. I'll never forget that." They stood facing each other, quiet but connected. Then, without planning to, Sarah reached out and took his hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me." He squeezed her hand gently. "And thank you for believing in me." That day marked a silent goodbye, though neither called it that. Sarah left the studio with a heavy heart, but also a strange sense of peace. What they had shared wasn't meant to last forever, was meant to wake something inside them both. In the following weeks, Sarah tried to focus on her own life again. She started painting in the evenings, something she hadn't done since her 20s. She reconnected with old friends, took long walks, and began to feel more grounded. Yet, sometimes, when she passed by the riverside or heard a certain song, her thoughts drifted back to Ryan. She wondered if he thought of her too. Then, one afternoon, months later, she received a letter in her mailbox. Her heart skipped when she saw his name on the envelope. She opened it carefully and began to read. "Dear Sarah, I hope this finds you well. The studio's doing great now. Got regular clients, and I'm thinking of opening another location soon. But no matter how busy I get, there's a quiet space in my heart that always thinks of you. I wanted to say thank you for your patience, your kindness, and for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I don't know what label to give what we had, but I know it was real. I hope life brings you all the happiness you deserve." At the bottom, he'd written simply, "With gratitude, Ryan." Sarah held the letter close for a long time. There was no sadness in her tears, on the warmth. He had moved on, and so had she. But the connection remained untouched by time. It had been a chapter that changed them both. Weeks later, fate brought them face to face again at a local art fair. Sarah was showcasing her new paintings, quiet landscapes filled with emotion and color. As she arranged her work, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Wow. These are incredible," Ryan said softly. She turned, surprised but happy. "Ryan? I didn't expect to see you here." "I saw your name in the program," he said, smiling. "I had to come." They talked for a wildlife conversation at first, then deeper as the crowd thinned. Sarah told him how painting had helped her heal. Ryan spoke about his growing business and how he'd started volunteering at a community center, offering free massage therapy for seniors and veterans. "You found your purpose," she said proudly. He nodded, and so did you. They shared a long, quiet smile. There was no tension now, no confusion, just mutual respect and a bond that time hadn't erased. As the evening ended, Ryan said, "Sarah, you once told me that life rarely gives second chances, but I think sometimes it gives the right people at the right time." That's what we were. Shay smiled softly. "Yes, and maybe that's enough." He hesitated before saying goodbye. "I'll always wish you well, Sarah." "And I you," she replied. "Always." When he walked away, Sarah watched him disappear into the crowd, her heart calm. For the first time in a long while, she felt complete, not because of romance, but because of understanding. Later that night, as she stood on her porch watching the stars, she thought about how life often gives us people who aren't meant to stay forever but to teach us something lasting. Ryan had taught her that love doesn't always have to be about possession or permanence. Sometimes it's about presence, the quiet moments that remind you you're still capable of feeling, of trusting, of opening your heart. She whispered to the night sky, "Thank you." Months passed and Sarah's art career blossomed. Her paintings began to gain attention, especially one piece she titled "The Quiet Between Us." It was a simple painting, two figures sitting near a river, facing opposite directions but connected by light between them. People called it emotional, haunting, and healing all at once. She never explained what it meant. Some stories, she realized, are meant to be felt, not told. Years later, she received an invitation in the mail. It was for the grand opening of a new wellness center, Ryan's second studio. On the back of the card was a handwritten note. "Your painting still hangs in my office. It reminds me that peace can exist even after goodbye." Sarah smiled as she read it. There was no ache anymore, only gratitude. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and that reason had served its purpose. They had helped each other rediscover something they'd both lost faith in: human connection. On the day of his opening, she sent him a small gift, a framed quote that read, "Some people enter our lives quietly, but their echo stays forever." She never knew if he wrote back, but she didn't need to. Some stories are complete without an ending, as she sat by her window that evening. Looking out at the same river where they had once talked, she felt a gentle peace. Life had moved forward, but the lesson stayed. Love isn't always about staying, it's about growing. And sometimes, the most beautiful love stories are the ones that teach you how to let go gracefully in the quiet hum of her home. With the canvas half finished beside her, Sarah smiled to herself. Ryan had once told her that healing was more about listening than doing. Now she understood. The heart listens, to it learns, forgives, and eventually finds peace in the memories that once hurt. She picked up her brush and began to paint again. This time, not to fill an emptiness, but to celebrate the space that had made room for understanding, for growth, and for a love that had no name but left an everlasting light.